Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning and something feels wrong. Not because the stock market crashed, not because a bank collapsed, not because the government announced a recession. The problem is much quieter. People simply stop buying things. Not forever, just for a few days. Nobody orders the new phone. Nobody upgrades the laptop. Restaurants are half empty. Online carts stay abandoned. People cancel weekend shopping plans and tell themselves they'll buy it next month. At first, nobody panics. In fact, it almost feels like a good thing. People are saving money. Credit card balances aren't growing. Families are finally putting something aside. Maybe for once everyone is being responsible. But then something strange happens. A store owner looks at yesterday's sales. They're down. Not a little, a lot. So he does what every business owner does when customers disappear. He waits. Maybe they'll come back tomorrow. They don't. And that's when the story gets interesting, because the economy doesn't run on money simply existing. It runs on money moving. Your salary becomes someone else's revenue. Their revenue becomes an employee's salary. That employee buys groceries. The grocery store pays its workers. Those workers pay rent. The landlord pays the bank. The bank lends money to another business. One person's spending becomes another person's income. So what happens when everyone decides to stop? At first, nothing dramatic. That's what makes it dangerous. A restaurant doesn't immediately close because Monday was slow. A clothing store doesn't fire everyone because customers stayed home for one weekend. A car manufacturer doesn't shut down a factory because nobody bought a car yesterday. Businesses have savings. They have cash reserves. They have loans. They have orders already placed. They have enough room to absorb a little shock. But imagine the same thing happening next week and the week after that. Now, the restaurant owner has a problem. He still has rent. He still has electricity. He still has employees. He still has suppliers waiting for payment. But customers aren't coming through the door. So he makes a decision. He cuts hours. One employee loses a shift, then another. Maybe nobody gets fired yet, but that employee notices something. Their paycheck is smaller. And suddenly the person who stopped spending to save money has less money coming in. So they cut something too. They stop eating at restaurants. They delay buying clothes. They cancel a trip. They postpone the new phone, which sounds perfectly reasonable, but remember what happened at the beginning. Everyone else is doing the exact same thing. And now, the thing that looked like financial responsibility starts feeding the problem it was supposed to protect people from. This is where economics becomes strangely human. Nobody has to make a stupid decision. Nobody has to panic. Nobody has to do anything obviously wrong. Millions of people can make completely rational decisions at the same time and create an irrational outcome. Think about it from one person's perspective. If you believe your job might become less secure, saving money makes sense. If you believe the economy is slowing down, delaying a purchase makes sense. If you're worried about the future, keeping cash in your bank account makes sense. But if everyone does it together, businesses lose revenue. Businesses respond by cutting costs. Workers lose income. Workers become even more cautious. Spending falls further. And now we're no longer talking about people simply choosing to save. We're talking about a feedback loop. Your spending isn't just about you. When you spend $50 at a local restaurant, that $50 doesn't simply disappear. It becomes revenue. Revenue pays someone. That person pays someone else. Eventually, some of that money comes back to you through wages, business income, investments, government revenue, or another economic transaction. The economy is basically a giant conversation where money keeps changing hands. When people stop talking, the conversation gets very quiet, and eventually somebody notices. Now make the experiment much bigger. Imagine it's not just one country. Imagine people everywhere suddenly become nervous about the future. They don't stop buying food. They don't stop paying rent. They don't stop paying electricity. They stop buying everything they don't absolutely need. No new cars, no expensive vacations, no new televisions, no furniture upgrades, no unnecessary clothes, no restaurant dinners, no impulse purchases, no I'll just treat myself for 1 month. What happens? The first businesses to feel it aren't necessarily the biggest companies in the world. They're the businesses that depend on people spending money they don't absolutely need to spend. Retailers, restaurants, travel companies, entertainment businesses, car car manufacturers, electronics companies, hotels, small businesses. Then something much bigger happens. Those companies stop ordering as much inventory. Factories receive fewer orders. Shipping companies move fewer products. Warehouses need fewer workers. Businesses stop hiring. Some start cutting employees. And now the problem has moved from shopping to jobs. This is where the story takes a turn. Because when people lose income, they don't just stop buying luxury products. They become careful about necessities too. Maybe they choose the cheaper grocery store. Maybe they delay repairing the car. Maybe they move into a cheaper apartment. Maybe they stop investing. Maybe they stop taking risks. And that creates another problem. Businesses don't just need customers. They need confidence. A business owner who believes people will spend next year is willing to hire someone today. He's willing to open another location. He's willing to borrow money. He's willing to buy equipment. He's willing to take a risk. But if he believes customers are disappearing, he waits. And when millions of business owners start waiting at the same time, the entire economy can slow down. This is why economists pay so much attention to consumer spending, because in many economies, households account for a huge share of economic activity. When consumers pull back, businesses feel it. When businesses feel it, workers feel it. And when workers feel it, consumers pull back even more. That's the loop. But maybe you're thinking, wait, if everyone stops spending unnecessarily, wouldn't that actually be good? And honestly, yes. For the individual, saving more money can be incredibly healthy. Paying down debt can be smart. Building an emergency fund can be smart. Buying fewer things you don't need can be smart. The problem isn't saving. The problem is what happens when spending collapses far faster than incomes and businesses can adjust. There's a difference between becoming financially responsible and the entire economy suddenly freezing. And here's where things get even more interesting. Governments know this. When economies slow dramatically, governments sometimes try to encourage spending. Interest rates can be changed. Taxes can be adjusted. Government spending can increase. Stimulus payments can be introduced. Central banks can try to make borrowing cheaper. Why? Because policymakers are often trying to restart that flow of money. They're trying to convince businesses to invest. They're trying to convince consumers to spend. They're trying to convince everyone that tomorrow will be better than today, because confidence is contagious. But so is fear. Imagine two people sitting next to each other. One says, "I'm saving because I think the economy is going to get worse." The other hears that and thinks, "Maybe I should save too." Then another person hears them. Then another. Nobody planned it. Nobody organized it. But suddenly, millions of people are behaving as though a recession is coming. And by behaving that way, they can actually help create some of the conditions they're afraid of. That's the paradox. Sometimes fear about the economy can become part of the reason the economy weakens. Now, imagine Atlas. He's sitting at home on a Friday night. He has money in his account. His job is still there. His bills are paid. Nothing has happened to him. But he opens his phone and sees headlines everywhere. Consumer spending is falling. Retail sales are weakening. Businesses are cutting jobs. Economic growth is slowing. Atlas thinks about his future. He was going to buy a new laptop. He decides to wait. His friend was going to buy a car. She decides to wait. A restaurant owner was planning to hire another employee. He decides to wait. A company was planning to open a new store. They decide to wait. And suddenly, the entire economy is filled with people waiting for someone else to move first. That's when the silence becomes expensive, because economies don't grow simply because people have money. They grow when people use money, invest money, borrow money, build things, hire people, take risks, and exchange goods and services. Money sitting still can protect an individual, but an economy where everyone freezes can become a very different story. And here's the uncomfortable part. If everyone stopped buying for one day, you probably wouldn't notice much. A week, businesses would notice. A month, workers would notice. Several months, governments, banks, companies, investors, and households would all start reacting. And eventually, the question wouldn't be, why aren't people shopping? It would become, why is everyone afraid to spend? And that's a much bigger problem, because once confidence disappears, getting it back isn't as simple as offering a discount. You can lower the price, you can advertise, you can launch a sale, you can offer cheaper loans, but you can't force someone to feel secure about tomorrow. And that might be the most important thing hidden inside this entire plot. The economy doesn't just run on dollars. It runs on expectations. A restaurant owner spends money today because he expects customers tomorrow. A company hires someone today because it expects demand later. A family buys a house because it believes they'll have income years from now. An investor buys a stock because they believe a company will be worth more in the future. Almost everything economic is a bet on tomorrow. So if everyone suddenly believes tomorrow is going to be terrible, they stop making those bets. And when enough people stop betting on tomorrow, tomorrow can start looking terrible. That's the strange cycle. Fear creates caution. Caution reduces spending. Reduced spending hurts businesses. Weak businesses reduce hiring. Reduced hiring creates more fear, and more fear creates even more caution. It becomes a circle. But there's one final twist. If everyone stopped buying unnecessary things, the world wouldn't necessarily collapse. In fact, some businesses would probably benefit. People would save more. Some debts would fall. Some waste would disappear. Some companies that rely on excessive consumption would shrink. And perhaps people would finally ask a question they rarely ask: do I actually need this? So the real danger isn't that people stop buying everything. The real danger is when spending collapses because people have lost faith in the future. Because there's a massive difference between saying, I don't want this, and saying, I'm afraid to spend anything. One is choice, the other is fear. And economies can survive people making better choices. What they struggle with is millions of people losing confidence at the same time. So the next time you hear someone say that consumer spending is good for the economy, don't take it to mean that you should go shopping just to help the economy. That's not the lesson. The lesson is much stranger. Every time money changes hands, it connects you to someone else.